And just again, welcome, and with our bracha, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. And with that,
Amen.
I will start the screen sharing. Thank you. And this is where we left off. Verse 10. Verse 10. Vahi Ra'av Ba'aretz. There was a famine in the land. Vayerid Avram Mitzrayma, and Abraham went down to Egypt, Lagur Sham, to reside there. Now the word Lagur, as opposed to Lichyot, right? Lagur has a specific and technical meaning in Hebrew, meaning as a temporary resident. In other words, he only went there temporarily. He never wanted to get a green card. So, and let's keep going. Ki chaved hara'av ba'aretz, for the famine was heavy in the land. And this little additional statement here, even without looking at Rashi, I think we can make some inferences. So I'm going to ask you if you have a sense of why would the Torah have given that? Excuse me, I'm having all kinds of interesting issues here. Why would the Torah have added that sentence? In other words, what information is really being added as to Abraham going down to Egypt because the famine was severe? Any ideas? So what I would infer from that is, had the famine not been severe, Abraham would have toughed it out. That staying in the land of Israel was important enough to Abram and his family, unless it got so bad. So in other words, only under extreme circumstances did Abraham leave the land of Israel. That's on a simple shot level, I would infer from that additional sentence. Excuse me.
Rabbi,
Yes.
God wanted Abraham to see all of the land of Canaan for his future descendants. So he traveled all around the land, but then the famine came and he had to go to Egypt for a while.
Yes.
But he didn't want to stay in Egypt. He wanted to come back to the land and see it again. He moved from one city to the other city.
Yeah.
You know, and also prayed God. You know, he set up a stone and prayed God for that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he that's right. So, and that's of course the force of this word lagur, right? To be there temporarily, and of course this is also a foreshadowing. That clearly, that even the going down to Egypt is a foreshadowing of what is going to happen later on with Joseph, and of course subsequently the experience of the Jewish people. So the Israelites in the land of Egypt. So let's take a look at Rashi on this. Ra'av ba'aretz. Let's see what he says. But wata ha'aretz levada. So he says, because it says ba'aretz, in the land, Rashi makes a diuk on this. He says specifically, right? That he says specifically the land of Israel, the land that he was in. Of course, it wasn't the land of Israel at the time. It was the land of Canaan. But regardless, specifically in that land, alone, levadaba, lin soto, here we go, to test him. So we have, as we're aware, that because of the last test of where Isaac, the binding of Isaac, that essentially our rabbis derive that there are 10 tests with which Abraham is going to be tested. And of course, he succeeds in all those tests. We can extrapolate beyond that to say that we can look at our own lives as a test, that there are ways in which we are tested in the course of our life. And this would also add meaning and a purpose to our existence, because that is the essential question, is what purpose, what meaning does our existence have? Why are we in this world? So one reason is to be tested. Excuse me. So to test him how? Im yaharher achar devarav. Now this is a beautiful additional implication of what's going on here. And the question was that See, Abraham had been told by God to go to this land. He'd picked up all his things. He had gone down to the land of Canaan, and boom, there's a famine there. A famine to the point of where he has to leave. He can't even stay there anymore. So, and he's just been told by God to go there. So the question is, would he question God's words? Dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And question in what sense? Well, continuing, She'amar lo lalechet el Eretz Canaan, because God told him to go to the land of Canaan. Va'achshav, and now masi'o latzeit mimenu. He's testing him, or he's forcing him to leave it. In other words, he could have said, God, what are you trying to do to me? So I think just sort of the whole idea of Abraham questioning God's motives, questioning God in a very deep kind of sense, and saying, here I trusted you, I did what you told me to do, and this is how you reward me, by having me to leave, having me to go out. So that is the understanding of the test. In other words, when we face these disadvantages, right, adversity, what do? Do we question God? Why are you doing this? And the point here is that Abraham doesn't. And the idea for us to deal with this. So yesterday, when I went to Kolamet, Rabbi Sarah Groff introduced the Torah portion by saying, and that was Noah, of course, by saying, who is the main character of the story? And there were various answers. I mean, the pshat would appear to be Noah, although he doesn't occur in the entire portion. There was one person who suggested it might be Abraham, that it really was a setup for Abraham. And then, of course, many people felt the real main character is God. And after that, I thought a little bit further, and I thought to myself, no, actually, if I were to suggest who the main character is, I would say it's us. That the Torah wants us to see ourselves as the main characters in these stories. So that here's another example. In other words, yes, we're reading about Abraham, and our sages are pulling out all this, extrapolating all these implications. But of course, who is this being addressed to? It's really being addressed to us. And in that sense, the Torah now becomes a way in which we can change, that we can transform ourselves. So
I think God was testing Abraham when he went to because God could have made rain. He didn't have to have he could have had rain, and he wouldn't have to go to Egypt. But God was testing him because he said, if Abraham goes to Egypt, will he start assimilating with the Egyptians and start praying to other gods? I think that's what he was doing.
So, okay, so you're suggesting an additional test by which God was testing Abraham, and that's very cool, Harlan. Thank you. Okay, that's what we've got to do, is sort of think about these things, and I'm glad your creative juices are flowing. All right. Okay, so let's go on with the next sentence here. Vayhi, and it was so, ka'asher hikriv lavo Mitzrayim, that when he drew near to enter Egypt, to come into Egypt, Vayomer el Sarai ishto, he said to Sarai, at this point, of course, he's Abram, not Abraham. That only happens at the end of this particular parsha. And his wife is not Sarah, it's Sarai, right? Means my princess, right? Avram would probably mean, I would translate it probably as mighty father, something like that, exalted father. So he says to Sarai, his wife, Hine na yadati, indeed, or behold, I understand, I know, ki isha yefat mar'eat, that in fact you are beautiful. You are of beautiful to behold. And this hine is sort of an hine. Harlan, please let me finish. Thank you. He says, the hine, he says now, is like, now I know. Behold. So it's as if he just discovered this. So there's some rabbinic interpretations of the force. In other words, they're trying to examine what is, that every single word has some meaning attached to it. So it's as if he now he realizes that she's so beautiful. Okay, Harlan, what would you like to say?
She was 65 years old then, and he was 75.
Yep.
He was 10 years older.
Yep.
She must have been beautiful all her life. I don't know.
That must be the case.
So
Yep.
I don't know.
All right. So it's a story, and we have to take it at what it's trying to tell us. But she's very, very attractive. She's a very attractive woman. So here we go. And Rashi's going to tell us. He's going to pull in on this. Hine na yadati, right? Behold, indeed, I know, right? Or now I know. Midrash Agadah, that there is a midrash, right? An interpretation. Ad achshav, that up to now, lo hikir ba, he did not recognize this. He did not see this. Why? Mitoch tzniut, because of modesty, she bishnehem, that they observed a level of modesty between the two of them. In other words, he did not look at her in a lustful kind of way, or they did not look at each other in a lustful kind of way. So, we are told in the third paragraph of the Shema, V'lo taturu acharei einechem, you shouldn't go astray after your eyes. And so there's this idea of modesty, of not, peeking and looking and trying to and to sort of gird up our sense of lust. So he never did. But here we go. So what happened here? V'achshav, but now he kirba. Why? He now saw this. He saw her. Al yedei maaseh, through a circumstance. Okay. So the story is that they were going, that I recollect, okay, that they went over a river, right, and somehow he saw, because she had to, part some of her clothing in order to cross the river, he saw her for the first time. That's the occurrence that happened, that they were crossing a river, and so he wound up seeing her. That's the rest of that little part. Okay. Davar acher, Rashi takes us in a different direction. Minhag holam, it is the way of the world. She'al yodeh torach. Oh, well, here we go. Okay, there we go. So forgive me. I thought this was a davar acher, but I really think this is the explanation of the story. Okay, that it is the way of the world. She'al yodeh torach haderech, that through that traveling is a very tiring kind of occupation, right? That through the difficulties of the way, Adam mitbazeh, okay, that, no, he is going in a different direction, forgive me, that a person starts to look a little bit, disheveled, right? A person sort of starts to look disheveled. Vezot amda beyofia. But she, on the other hand, looked as beautifully kempt as ever. Okay, so that's another way of understanding this. That why he understood this now. Because normally everyone was sort of starting to look disheveled, and she didn't. Upshuto shel mikra, but the basic meaning of the verse. Hine na, okay, that this phrase, Hine na, Higia hasha'a, the time has arrived, sheyesh lid'og, where I have to be concerned, al yofiech, okay, regarding your beauty, yadati ze yamim rabim, that in fact I've known this for a long time, ki yifat mar'eat, that you are in fact beautiful to look at. V'achshav, and now, anu ba'im bein anashim, now we are arriving amongst people, shchorim u'mechuarim, who are, well, shchorim means dark, okay, u'mechuarim would be ugly, okay, achihem shel kushim, this is not PC stuff, right? They are brothers, literally it says brothers of Ethiopians. Velo hurgalu be'isha yafa. And this is embarrassing to have to share, but this is what it says. Okay, I'm just trying to tell you. I'm not trying to pull back necessarily. Velo hurgalu be'isha yafa. And they're not used to seeing a beautiful woman. And of course, what we're reading here, sadly, is a cultural kind of thing. It's, as I said, it's embarrassing. It really is. And on the other hand, having to try to, you know, admit that this is in here, and at the same time being able to struggle with it. The basic point is fine, which is saying, these are people who are not used to seeing someone as lovely as you, and leave it at that would be fine. All right, but again, you have to understand, we have this whole experience with those ancient Egyptians. And unfortunately, this is showing racial prejudice. That's have to say it. Okay. So, Vidomelo, he says, so to support this hine, right? Because here's hinena, that this hinena has this suggestion, okay? He says Adoni Surna, and this is from the place in where I believe Lot is saying to the angels, come in, turn away, right? Because the angels are going to be attacked by the people in the city of Sodom. So, any comments or reactions to this? Because this is difficult stuff.
Yeah, I do. Abraham sinned right then and there. He didn't trust God. He didn't have to give his wife to the Pharaoh. He didn't trust God. God would have saw to him that his wife, even though she was beautiful, he would protect her.
Okay.
I don't get that.
Okay. So if we accept your interpretation, Harlan, the fact is that how do we see Abraham now? He's a human being. Okay. So whether he didn't trust God, or whether there's also a principle of, not to count on miracles. That on the one hand we want to trust God with what happens. Okay. I mean, you could have said the same thing, I suppose. We could have argued that maybe Abraham should have just trusted God, that God would see him through the famine. But this is a very important issue, in terms of being a religious person, is to what degree do you throw everything in God's lap and say, God, you take care of me. I'm going to trust you. You're going to do everything. Or do we try to balance things and say, look, on the one hand, we have to trust God as to what happens to us, especially in cases of adversity, and that's what we're talking there. And if we don't, we also have to, if we don't want to just rely on miracles, we have to take whatever steps we can to use our knowledge and our experience to protect ourselves. So, that's one of the great challenges of being a religious person, that it is a question of trying to walk a path between two extremes. One extreme is expecting God to do everything for you and not doing anything yourself, and the other extreme of not relying on God at all. But I do believe that within Judaism, and I think you're bringing out here some very important issues, and that we have to try and sort of, as I said, balance it. And you have to take whatever steps you can do on a natural kind of level. And we're going to see this as to how Abraham tries to deal with the fact that Sarah is barren and that they're incapable of conceiving, and that he takes other steps before there is a miracle. So I think that there's that balance. Yes.
Yeah. So isn't your point also perhaps also that that's part of the test, right? You were saying that earlier that, we're here to be tested, right? So part of that test is how well do you balance those two extremes, right? Can you interpret it that way as well?
Yes, I think that's also part of the test. Yes, and this test of what's going to happen, as you're going to see, right? That that he has to face this possible danger, and I'm hoping to explain to you because it raises another question as you're going to see in a moment. Excuse me, this messing around with the text. Okay, so let's go to the next. Let's go to the next one if I can. I have to see. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what's happening is I'm having some issues here with. There we go. All right. We're right here. Okay. Vayiru ota. Okay, so what's going to happen? Right, that they're going to see. Okay. Sorry, let me see where we are here. Yeah. Okay. Let me go back to where we actually are at. Okay. Vahaya kiru ota hamitzrim. Right. So this is the next verse. Right. It shall be. This is Abraham speaking to Sarah. Kiru otach hamitzrim, that when the Egyptians see you, va'amru ishto zot, and literally, of course, here we keep coming across this word amar, and what it means is to think, right? Va'amru ishto zot, and they think this is the wife of this man, right? She is the wife of this man. V'hargu oti, they will kill me. V'otach yechayu, and they'll allow you to survive. Let's see if there's any Rashi on that. No Rashi. Okay. All right, let's go on now. Imrina. So here's his strategy, right? Imrina, please say, Achoti at, you are my sister. Leman yitavli ba'avorech, so that they do well by me on your account. V'chayta nafshi biglalech, and my soul will, in other words, what he's saying, literally it says, and my soul will live biglalech, on your account, because of you. So of course it means, and I will survive because of you. They will let me live. So there's lots of stuff actually within this, all right? One is that the Torah is giving us a really positive insight into Sarah's bravery and her love for Abraham in her willingness to do this. And of course, on the other piece, it looks as if Abraham is not telling the truth. He's telling her not to tell the truth. And in fact, of course, to lie. And I have a theory, and it is a theory, as to how, in fact, he is not asking her to lie, but rather not to tell the whole truth. Okay, he's asking her to cover up part of the truth, but nevertheless, she will be telling the truth. And I'll explain that if I can today in a moment. All right. So Rashi simply says, he goes specific on Laman yitavli ba'avurech, so that they do well by me, right? They do well to me on your account. And he says very clearly, Yitnu li matanot, they will give me gifts, right? So it's interesting, sort of what's teasing out in terms of Abraham, and the part that I actually love is that he's not so righteous, not so goody as to saying, well, he's a saint. Not to say that he wasn't a saint, but what's involved in sainthood? Do you have to be absolutely perfect, right? So it's interesting, right? There's a lot of balance. Now,
I think that the giving the gifts the idea was that they'll decide that they want to marry you, and so they'll give me gifts because I'm your male relative and I deserve a gift.
Right.
Is that the idea?
Yes, it would be dowry, right? I assume, or of a kind, right? Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There was a bride price, right? Bride price. Yeah,
right.
It does. There is that possibility, right? There is that possibility. So how is he not telling her to lie? So here is my theory. We know that traditionally, and this is stated explicitly, so the theoretical part is that I've never come across anything to support what I'm about to tell you, all right? And we know that Haran, that was one of Terach's sons, and Haran died. And Haran had children. Okay, Haran had children, and one of them we know for a fact that Milcah and Lot, and there was one other child, Yiscah. And we know that Abraham's brother, Nahor, married Milcah. We know that. And then it says, that Abraham and Nahor took wives. And of course, it mentions that he takes Sarai and that Nahor takes Milcah. But the understanding is that Sarai, this is in the tradition, that Sarai and Yiscah are one and the same. It's just a different name for Sarai. So in other words, both of Haran's daughters were married by Abraham and Nahor. And then there's Lot, there's the brother Lot, and Lot goes along, right? Ultimately winds up going along with Abraham and Sarah. We know this. Here's what I'm thinking. I am thinking that when Haran died, he left a wife. And it's an iteration of a levirate marriage, and that is that Terach married Haran's wife. Now, this sounds like incest, but the truth is that even levirate marriages have a level of incest. It is forbidden, it is considered incestuous for you to marry your the widow of your brother, okay? Except in those circumstances, at least according to Jewish law, according to Torah law, if he dies without children, okay? But if he has a child, you're absolutely forbidden to do it. So we have a conflict of laws in that. But regardless, I'm thinking, and that's why I'm saying, I've never read anything to support this, but if in fact Terach married Haran's widow, that would make Sarah Abram's half-sister. And in fact, that's what I'm thinking. Now, there may be some support of this later on when Abraham has to do this again, and Abraham explains to Avimelech that he's her sister as well. So they don't have, in other words, they share a common father. Not that Terach was his direct, well, obviously, Terach is both Sarah's grandfather and Abram's father. So they do share a father in a sense, but they don't share a mother. So that's how I've tried to work out and figure out why Abraham is not in fact lying when he asks Sarah to say that she's his sister. In other words, it's a part truth is what it is. And we'll stop here today, and I'll make the marking in the text. I'll see if I can. Let's see if this works. Yep, it did. And here we are. We'll start right there at Shani. And I will stop the share. Sorry. Stop the recording.